A lot of you might be thinking, what's the best deck in Star Wars Unlimited right now? And I'm going to tell you, it's Blue Green Qira. Whether it's the ECL version or my 30 list, I think one of those two, depending on your play style. I'm leaning 30 right now, and you're going to see why. But I think this is the best deck you can be playing in Star Wars Unlimited. I think if you follow me or Woo's take on this deck, you are going to be set up for success. I know that at a recent big event in England, it just didn't make the top 8. But I think that there were, some good takeaways from that. Mike Henson, guy from our Discord, first ever big tournament on pretty much like 59 cards for what of 60 of what I'd be playing that given weekend. Went 5-3 and came in 30th of his first big event. So I think that is huge. I think the list served him well, and I think as he gets more reps under his belt, I bet you he's gonna be making some moves with the deck. But there are some deck lists out there that I think just aren't very good. And so that's why I believe that you guys subscribe to us and watch our YouTube content, because I think what we have going is more efficient and more effective than some of the stuff out there. So I'm going to go through the Walkling list that I dropped at the end of the month that people could have played at that event and I think would have done well with. Shout out to Michael. But also just kind of some of my takes on it, because we talk about this thing that the list is more than 60 cards, and that is very important. Your list is a snapshot of what you want to accomplish in a given weekend. And so there are things that move in and out of the list and things on the periphery always. And so we're going to discuss those. All right, so this is the list that I would have been on at the end of the month when I dropped this Walkling list. Now, here's a big thing about this list. Dr. Pershing, a lot of people said he was overrated. He probably was, but he's still really good. Dropping him early to get an extra card to set up for a 6/6 Chilton, or just late game flipping off of Vader when you're at kind of close to parity and you're trying to look to get ahead in other soft control, or even mid-rangey matchups. I know that's a very minute distinction. He has been incredible. He's a must answer, kind of like a tech, lets you kind of go late with those tech decks when, if God forbid, you cannot kill it right on the flip. So he's been a real standout for me. Another card I want to draw your attention to, and it was at 2 at the start of this month, and that's really just a give and take of what you expect to be in the meta. I've seen a lot of decks try to attack Qira in the air post kind of flip in the second half of the mid game, and so I put 2 in there to kind of counterbalance that. You could go 1-1, and that's one thing that I am always looking at, where I want to shed from the list. I've tried cutting Long Pike, wouldn't recommend. So that's a card that's been really good for me in stopping some of these decks trying to go to space after you take over the ground and get chip damage to finish you off. So it's a card that's good against Boba. It's good against Sabine in the second half of their kind of phase. It's good against Yellow Sabine, and it's also good against like Star Destroyers like Avenger, being able to kind of blink an attack turn so you don't get too low on resources. So I've seen a lot of applications, and there's sometimes against Palp too, where like you need to kind of be aggressive to pressure an early flip. It's funny, I think there's a sentiment from people who I don't think understand Qira that well, that Kira's like bad into Palp. Me and Mike went 4-1 against it, and I think at Gen Con, I think the time that I lost, I just honestly misplayed. You can pressure them pretty well with Qira, and then when they flip Palp, you Super Laser Blast, and then you play the game at parity, and because they have all these lower cost units to set up their Emperor Royal Guard, their card value isn't that great, especially if you keep them from using that draw engine, which I think you can reliably do. So I actually don't mind playing against Palp, but again, I've downloaded that matchup into my brain and practiced it. I wouldn't say it's necessarily favorable, but there are different versions that, on your sliding scale that you're better against. But if you know the lines and you play well, you can win. You can still easily win. I think cutting Chilton is something that you have to decide right off the gates. He does take a lot of deck resources. I think he is the reason to play this 30 deck, and if I wasn't going to play him, I would just play ECL, because there are a lot of good, valuable ECL plays, and I think he's worth those extra resources. One card I want to talk about right now is I'm actually working around Maul being Dooku because it's another blue card. So while I love Maul, if I was to submit a deck today, I'd actually have Dooku in the main. And that's some of the things that the guys in the Kashik Operative tier get. They get our whole deck history. They can see every single change that I'm making. But I still want to provide valuable information to everyone and kind of talk through this update that'll trickle down to everyone else. And that's Maul likely coming out and being one of those bubble cards that I bring him in when I'm like, oh man, I'm really having trouble taking out leaders on the ground. I'm going to go to Maul. But as I've seen it, you can pair Qira and Count Dooku together to take out things not only on the ground, but in space, which can be important. You can take out some pesky, shielded units. Like recently, I played against somebody who, had a shielded cunning guy, feeling pretty good, Dooku, or jetpack Dooku. So, shout out to Dooku. He's been great, and he's a blue card for your Chili. Another card I want to talk about is Vigilance. For me, that's a card that goes in between 2 and 3 in the sideboard, and it's really how much Sabine am I going to play in a given day. If I think I'm only going to face it like once in the Swiss and once in the top 8, I'm cool with this. If I think I'm going to face it 3 times, and shout out to Mike Henson, he went 3-0 against Sabine with only 2 in the main deck. What a sicko. But I would definitely go 3 in the main deck. It's a comfort card for me. I feel good when it's in my hand, and it's a little bit more expensive, so that means it helps out my Chilton and they can work together. I personally wouldn't go under 2 Super Laser Blasts. I think some people are doing 1 and 1. I found that against Palp, I talked about that play, I really want to pressure a flip and Super Laser Blast, and if I ever have to resource it, that play is gone. So I love 2 there. Another card that comes in and out, depending on the meta, is Relentless. Sometimes Relentless can be like an auto win and just be incredible. We'll cut that sneeze out. But other times it is just not very effective. So I could see, cutting the Relentless and bringing in some more top end, or another Devastator. Devastator's been insane. You can try main decking 1 Palp's Return if you think there's going to be a ton of control decks and discard, but I'm always weary about adding green cards. At least that'd be a 1-for-1. But yeah, Relentless is a card that I've cut out. You can kind of see where you want to hedge accordingly. 2 Death Trooper, let's talk about that. Likely not going to stay. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I'm going to go back to 3. And the main reason is not only pairing with your Vader to get that 7 attack flip, but also when you are able to use Pike Sentinel to finish someone off with Death Trooper. I think that's still a really good play. It's obviously better with ECL for potential 2-for-1s, but I think in this list right now, I would bring back the Death Trooper. So I'm going to pan and show you kind of after talking about these things. Quick sideboard, 3 top target, I think is a must. I wouldn't really go down to 2, but I guess you could if you really don't see any Sabines. But that would be, you could probably make more sweeping changes than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut to another version, and this would be like what I would play tomorrow. So I'm showing you like where I was at the start of the month, the reasons, and like where I'd be tomorrow. But the thing we have to consider is like the list is more than 60 cards, so be aware that even if I'm at one snapshot in a certain day, know why they're in my deck and what the reason is and how I use them, so that way you can make those decisions yourself. All right, so this is where I am September of 2024. With some of those changes we talked about, one thing I really want to make clear is like this is where I'm at for the reasons I stated. However, I'm always looking to change things around given what I expect in a meta. So if you take this exact list and you're like, man, I'm only going to face 7 Sabines, well, that would be silly. Like play 3 Vigilance. Heck, for main top target if you're going to face Sabine every round. You know what I mean? Tune it to like the meta you either know or expect, and make it your own. If you don't like playing Childson and it's like not working for you, play our ECL version. But the point is, if you're on 30, which I think for pound is probably the better version in terms of matchup split. I think that on ECL there are very punishing plays you can accomplish, but I think that deck can kind of get wins stolen against them. And so for me, I think this is the more consistent build that I personally would be playing. One card on the bubble for me right now is still, am I going to play 2 System Patrolcraft? I've lost some top end because of it. You see Relentless in the sideboard. Should there be 2? Can I go down to 2 Palps returns? These are all the questions I'm considering. And what that'll mean is like, okay, do I expect the meta to go late? Then, and maybe I can hedge with 1 System Patrolcraft and get a 3rd Snoke or a second Devastator or a 3rd Avenge or something in the late game to kind of help me there. Am I expecting a lot of discard? Okay, like maybe I need to be main decking a Palps return to like hedge against that. So those are the kind of things that I consider. I think 2-1 resupply split could be something that could be explored. Personally, I'm feeling very good about this. I don't feel like I need to double ramp as much as I did in, say, Iden, because Qira can deal with other leaders. So when I was a big Iden boy, I really relied on double ramp, Vader, kill their leader, and then shut the game down. Here, Qira can pretty much do that herself much earlier and reliably safer with some of the Sentinels I have. So that's why I'm okay on 5 ramp pieces. But if you expect the meta to go long, go ahead and make that change. It's completely reasonable. I think that I still am considering 1 Rivals Fall in the 1 to 2 Rivals Fall in the 60. Just for the fact that I think Boba's armor is going to be on the uptick. However, I think people are, well, I think if you're not playing Fell the Dragon in your main, that's a big mistake because of the fact that later in the game, you have to be doing more than one thing. Like if I need to take out an Avenger or Devastator or even a Crate, like I don't want to pay 6 to do that. I want to pay 4 and then advance my board state. Because if I'm not being efficient with my resources late in the game, I'm going to fall behind because like I took the whole turn to deal with their last turn's threat, presumably, right? So let's talk about like a 9 resource play, having Fell the Dragon versus Rivals Fall, right? If I'm on 9 resources, I can Fell the Dragon and then smuggle out a Long Pike versus if I only have Rivals Fall, like the plays available to me are significantly diminished. Like you still have some, but that's a much stronger play than playing like Pike Sentinel or Inferno 4. So when I'm looking at this list, I'm trying to be as sleek as possible. And so that's the reason why I think Fell is really important in this. And I think I wouldn't cut. 1 Takedown, I could see if maybe there are more early ambush plays not needing it. But given this deck and given some of the shielded units with Cunning and stuff like that, and the fact that you can Qira, flip, and then take down something, I still like it as a 1. I think it's still really good there. So again, highlights of this deck, Dr. Pershing, I think it's been incredible. He's the glue that binds the deck together in terms of whether you're making your Child Sim bigger or you're flipping him in the later game to create a card advantage against decks that traditionally might be able to outgrind you, like some of the tech decks, insulates you against discard, which is very prevalent in the meta, things like that. So this is where I'm at with the questions that I raised of, can I cut a System Patrolcraft for a little more top end? Do I want to stay with the 3 Death Troopers, which I think is correct? Is there a world where you cut one of your lower drops? I think they're looking pretty good. I've enjoyed kind of being able to fight a little early, especially when I need to pressure. So yeah, those are the consideration and the things that I'm mindful of in this list and moving forward. As always, I invite you to make this list your own, and I'd love to hear kind of the changes that you have or you would consider in your deck. And what are some of your like fringe cards? Like if we have a lot of upgrades, are we playing calculated lethality? Is there a way that we're like going to reliably be able to play something like a choose sides? Do we want to main deck Devastators? Like, what are some things that you're considering that might be not in your 60, but are kind of on the periphery? Because those are cards that are really important to identify. All right, guys, that's it from me. See you. Hey, Editing Maddie here. I just wanted to jump back in and say one more thing. If you liked this kind of content, if you liked me going through a list I have and then what I would specifically play in a given week, me talking about some of the bubble changes and my take on a current meta and what I expect. We have a new podcast coming out. It is at our playtesting preparation tier, our $15 tier on Patreon, and what you get is Discord access, up-to-date deck list, and then this new weekly podcast where we talk about exactly what we play into a given tournament, our more expounded takes on our lists, because it's hard to get those points across in text and also in our bi-weekly pod. So it's just using the better medium of conversation to pull out some more nuanced thoughts. And then we're also going to bolster that with kind of guest speakers when, maybe there aren't as much events going on. We might get some high-level judges or high-level players and bring them in as well. So stay tuned for that. If that sounds good, check it out.